Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Philanthropy Podcast. On today's episode, I want to talk about how to be more positive. I've had a few people reach out. I gave a few suggestions and topics we could cover, and this was the topic that people were very interested in. So if you clicked on it today, then maybe you're looking for a little more positivity and sunshine in your life also. And that's great. You came to the right place. So, of course, being a yogi, a lot of my lessons are going to come from my yoga background, and more so than that, also my lived experience, right? So the shift and the transformation that I experienced in my life as a result of having so many yoga teachings and practices in my life, and they're really incredible, very transformative. So this is coming to you from a lot of my yogi background. So with being positive, it's really important that we understand positivity is a mind shift. Okay? So we are shifting our attitude, our thoughts, our maybe even beliefs. And that is not an easy feat. We're going to do a complete overhaul, okay, of the way you're thinking, and hopefully by the end of this episode you're starting to feel a little bit more confident that you have, some of the ingredients and steps that are going to help you take this attitude shift to the next level. Okay, so that's my goal for you. Hopefully we can get there. Now, having the background in yoga and meditation, you know what's coming. We are going to cover meditation. And if you're unfamiliar with meditation, go back to my first episode. We do a brief meditation there, and then I'll kind of get you, into the groove of things, some of the things to consider on how to set it up. And in that episode, we just focused on the breathing, right? We're not paying attention to the thoughts in that episode. But now we're taking it into another dimension, another level. We are going to start looking at the thoughts. And so the reason we're going to do meditation is because what happens when you meditate is that you have a very focused concentration. And that is the beautiful part about meditation, that it's going to help you to take your energy and funnel them in one direction. And of course, for a yogi, the ultimate purpose of meditation is to self-realize, right? It's to, achieve enlightenment, nirvana, these terms that you've heard about. We're not doing that here today. If you do, great. Always I say, I'm so excited for you. I'm happy, and I hope you do achieve that milestone in your life sometime, this lifetime. But for all intents and purposes, we're just going to scale it back a little bit. We're going to, work on this skill set because we need the skill. So the reason we want to go to meditation, because we are focusing, is because what happens is in our day-to-day lives, we often end up moving subconsciously, like our thoughts are running the show. We are not taking control of those thoughts. And because of that, it's a very unconscious, subconscious process. All kinds of crazy things are going on in there all the time. If you struggle with going to bed on time because your mind won't stop thinking, you need meditation. And that's what I always tell people. And I pull them into my office or sit them down somewhere. The amount of people I have just sat down, let's learn how to meditate. It's up there. It's my thing. And because it is the most amazing skill that you could ever learn. So try it. Go back to episode 1, learn some of the basics on meditation. And now we are going to be starting to focus our thoughts. Focus our energy on our thoughts. Okay? So with that, we are now going to be taking control of our mind and the things that are going on. So if you're meditating, and before we were allowing the thoughts to float on by, now we're going to stop and we're going to examine those thoughts, because what we're going to be doing now, this is part of the overhaul. We are going to do some major house cleaning in your brain, in your thoughts. Okay, stay with me. This is really important because there's a lot of stuff going on inside your head. And now we're going to house clean. And if you have ever cleaned a room in your house, you have looked at it and you said, gosh, this is a disaster. This is what meditation is. It is cleanup time. So we're going to take everything and we're going to look at it. If you watch Marie Kondo, I think that's her name, and she is like, about organizing and having the good, good Zen energy, good chi, something like that. But we are going to be looking at the things that serve us and don't serve us, the things that bring us joy and don't bring us joy. So you're going to start taking stock of everything that's going on. And the reason we want to do that, you think about cleaning your house, you will probably put things into piles. I know I do that, right? I'll look at everything and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. We need some organization. We're going to decide what we like, and what we want to keep and hang on to. And so we're going to put that into a pile. And then we're also going to look at the things that are garbage, useless, broken, they're just taking up space. It's clutter. And we're going to put that into a pile. And then we're going to take the other things and go, you know what, maybe there's some use here and maybe we could do something with this or give it away. There's still some value to this. Then we're going to say, okay, then that's going to go to donation or repair or we're going to repurpose it right away. We're not going to just leave it sitting there. So it's going to be the same thing with your thoughts. I want you to categorize things and you will be able to start noticing what's negative. We all know what a negative thought looks like. It feels ugly and gross. Maybe it's, judgmental towards ourselves, judgmental towards others. And the key part about that is that I want to stop there for a second because judgments are snapshot decisions, right? And the ultimate purpose of a judgment on an animalistic sense is survival. Is this safe? Is this not safe, right? And that's to keep us alive. And sometimes you will need to make those judgment calls. But the thing is, we can get caught up in that cycle. And then we are suddenly just constantly judging. This person, that thing, whatever. And then what happens is they're snapshots. So they're static. So, we are freezing somebody in that moment in whatever it is, and we're making a determination about them. We're saying so-and-so is lazy. So-and-so is angry. So-and-so is, whatever the judgment is. And it's often negative. And the thing with that is that humans are not static. Right? They are very dynamic. We are fluid. We are growing. We are changing. Yeah, sometimes we screw up and we have those moments and we could say in that moment, yes, that was maybe a little bit too angry. Maybe I, was having a lazy moment, but there's always a story behind those things. And if we just stop and freeze frame on the judgment, we're not making room for the story. We're not making room for the growth. We're not making room for forgiveness and, and the things that we really need to embody if we're going to be positive. So now you're taking stock of the negative things, okay? Some of these thoughts you're going to have to just toss out, right? So if you had a really ugly thought about someone and it made you feel real bad, and then later maybe you learned some information and you felt bad for thinking the way that you did, well, that's what I'm saying. We need to, get some of that clutter out and stop hanging on to these negative ideas of things or people. And part of that is complaining, right? I have someone in my life, and I won't name them, but they're going to be listening to this podcast for sure. And they are kind of a chronic complainer. And they know they are because I've actually had this conversation with them. And, and it can get heavy on other people. When you're complaining, you drag people down, right? Because we have energy between us and other people. We pick up on, how people are feeling, their moods, the things they say. And if somebody is chronically complaining, it drags down other people's spirits too. And so this person, it got to the point where, I'd kind of mentioned it a couple times, like you're complaining, maybe cut it out, and they weren't even aware. Except that now I kind of started to make a joke out of it. And, and this person would start and, in the opening dialogue, this conversation, and they're like complaining about this. And then I would stop them. I'd say, okay, you have 2 more complaints, and then I'm not listening to you anymore. And then I would laugh, and then they would laugh because they didn't realize that they were consistently complaining. And so now they were like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more aware of what I'm putting out there. And that's part of that. So that's part of that negativity. Understanding the things that you say, the things that you do have an impact on people around you. So if you're in a chronic negative state, then other people are going to be too, right? And misery loves company, that's the old saying. But nobody wants to be miserable. I really firmly believe that nobody wants to be negative, nobody wants to be miserable. Sometimes we just don't know how to get out of there. Well, that's what today's about. So now we're starting to notice those thoughts, the things that we can throw out. And then we're also going to look at some of the thoughts that are negative maybe, but can we challenge those thoughts? And in this line of thinking, I'm thinking specifically about the thoughts that we have about ourselves, right? So maybe they're negative and it's not as easy to throw out a thought about ourselves, but can we challenge it? Can we reframe our thinking? Like I said, the lazy example. Oh, I'm so lazy all the time, and maybe we're saying this about ourselves, but maybe we could say, you know what? Reframing it looks like I didn't have a lot of energy that day, but you know what? Maybe today I need a little bit more kindness. I need a slower pace. I need some self-care because life has been really crazy lately, and I need to give that to myself, which means maybe I'm not going to do the dishes as I normally do. I'm not going to clean my room or make my bed. I'm going to just lay there. And sometimes you do need that, and that's okay, but you also have to give yourself permission so you're not beating yourself up. And I think too often people are so hard on themselves. And so especially if you notice a negative thought about yourself, I want you to challenge that thought, right? I want you to go, hey, can I look at this a little bit differently? The standards that we have sometimes for ourselves and for others can be a little idealistic. They can be a little harsh, and sometimes we don't give ourselves room to breathe and relax, and that's part of when I think of Hatha yoga and how I'm trained as a yogi. We have an active phase in our asana series, and we also have the relaxation phase, and it goes back and forth, and it's to mimic the sun and the moon because that's how energy flows, right? There's busy times and then there's slower times. And so we have to also give that grace to ourselves that we can't run full speed, and that's why even in our daily life cycle, we have an active phase, which is the daytime when we're working and, going about our business. And then we have a resting phase where we sleep. Our bodies need that. And so your thoughts do too. You have to remember that I know people are so goal-driven in this society, which is wonderful. It's great. It means that we improve a lot of things all the time in our society. But if we're not giving ourselves that grace and that compassion to rest and relax, sometimes we won't give that to other people too. And then that's part of the judgment where, we might start labeling them, well, it's the comparative thinking, and in yoga, we're always saying, don't compare, don't contrast, because people are on different journeys. And so we need to respect that and not set up this, constant crazy competition. So now we've looked at tossing out negative thoughts and judgments, maybe habits like complaining. We've looked at what can we keep and salvage, what can we reframe and look at differently. And then now we're going to move on to the next pile, the positive. So I want you to think about, what thoughts that you have about yourself or others that you know are positive because they make you feel good inside. And maybe it's, your grandmother, and she's so kind and lovely and generous, and you love, that's a great thought. Keep that for sure. Or maybe you think, I'm really proud of myself, and how well I did at something recently, and it made me feel really good inside. So, thoughts like that we want to hang on to. But now you're going to take stock of everything, because that's what we do. Marie Kondo's organizing her rooms. We're doing the same thing in our brain. So we have our negative pile, our let's, challenge it, maybe change things. We also have our positive pile. And now we're going to see what needs to go, what needs to be brought in, right? Okay, so that's the fun part. And this is the bringing in the positive energy. But then, again, this is a mind shift. This is an overhaul, changing things. So you'll probably start to have to change some practices in your life, okay? Because we've taken stock, we want to add things in, we want to filter things out, but there's an active part to all of it. It's not just the filtering the thoughts. It's also the activities that are going to support the thoughts, the things that we're going to do a little bit differently. So some of the things that we could think about if we are thinking of negative thoughts, we want to look at what are the things that are helping those negative thoughts to enter, right? Sometimes it is the people we surround ourselves with. Sometimes it is, the music that we're listening to. It's, the books that we're reading, the movies that we're watching, the TV shows, because, just as I said earlier, people can pick up on your energy. We're picking up energy from all kinds of sources. And we really need to have a filter on that. And I'm going to stop right there for a little bit, because I do want to mention the energy systems in yoga. There are 3 types of energies that we often talk about as yogis. They're called the 3 gunas. And in these 3 gunas, they're just different forms of energy. And so there's tamas, and then there's rajas, and there's sattva. And these forms of energy flow throughout everything. And once you start to become aware and conscious of these energies, you understand how they affect you. They impact you in so many different ways. So tamas is probably described as maybe one of the more negative energies, because it leans towards slowness and depression and like in foods, things that are highly processed or dead, like meat, or, things that are going to kind of drag down your energy and put you in kind of a mental, fog. They can be a little bit depressive. So there are thoughts that have a tamasic energy. There are foods. There are activities. Tamas is really more often aligned to like darker energies, occult practices, witchcraft, that kind of thing. But, you might start to notice this kind of prevailing energy that sometimes if you go somewhere and you're like, ooh, I didn't really like that energy, sometimes that's tamas. And there's also rajas. That's another level. Rajas is very excitable energy. And so this is where we're thinking of, somebody's hyper, somebody is just like overflowing with energy, but not really in a good way, but more hectic or chaotic, and you're just excitable. So sometimes that can be, in the foods that you consume, like we're thinking of like onions and garlic and spices, and these things can really, and caffeine, stimulants, things can really spike your energy up, but it's not always a good thing. You might think that, having lots of energy is great, but the thing with rajas is that it can create an angry mental state. It can create drama. And so it's kind of over the top energy. And you'll see this in other people, and so it can be negative. It can be very negative. And so, pay attention to that kind of an energy. And then, the third type of energy is called sattva or sattvic. And sattvic energy means that you are really working towards, I guess, more balance. And this is more of like a spiritual kind of aim in that kind of energy. It's more imbued with, thinking positively and happily and peaceful harmony. Like if you're somewhere and it just feels so good, people would say it has good sattvic energy, good karma. So sattva is also another form of energy, and that's the one, of course, we definitely want to align with more often when we're thinking about our thoughts and how to be positive, right? We definitely want more of that positive kind of energy in everything that we're doing, and also in our thoughts. So now you're aware of the 3 types of energy that naturally flow throughout the world. And we, of course, discussed some of the things that are maybe going to influence negative thinking, right? And so, and like I said, you're looking at movies and, and books and things that kind of, maybe they have a tamasic energy, maybe they have a rajasic energy. And you're starting to understand, hey, if I am giving my attention to these things, I'm inviting these energies into my person, into my thoughts, into my world. And I mean, you're free to do it all you want, but then you probably will struggle with thinking positively, right? If you stay up all night watching horror movies or listening to rap music, which is like, hey, I loved rap music when I was younger, but at some point I stopped and I was like, wow, I don't know if I want to keep listening to the messaging that's in some of the songs about, maybe hurting people, or degrading women and things like that. Even though it had a really good beat, I was kind of like, those messages, every time I sing them, they're coming into my brain, and I'm not really okay with that. So then I had to make that decision. Okay, do I want these energies to be lingering around me all the time? Do I want those thoughts to be affecting me, impacting me? And with movies and things like that, so you start to look at yourself as this sponge, because we're like energy sponges, and we're absorbing everything, and we're putting out things too. So you have to really take control of filtering what's coming inside, and if it's negative or not. Is it tamasic? Is it rajasic? And so that's one place you're going to be filtering the negative stuff out. But we also want to be inviting practices in that are going to help us to increase that positivity, increase that sattva into our lives. And there's lots of things that you could do. One thing that you could do to invite more positive energy into your life is to have a gratitude journal. So when I was going through one of my divorces, I've had 2, my second divorce, my therapist recommended that I have a gratitude journal. And she gave me this little purple journal, and she wanted me to be writing down all the things that I was grateful for. And the challenge was I had to do 10 items every single day. But then tomorrow, I couldn't use any of those 10 that I had already mentioned. It had to be 10 different things. And so, of course, now you're getting into the 8th day and the 12th day, and, you're at 120, 150 different things. And it was a challenge, right? But it was a good challenge because it really helped me to change the way that I was thinking. We have so much to be grateful for. You don't need a perfect life to have gratitude. You can, stop and be grateful that, the weather's really nice. In some parts of the world, maybe they're struggling with some kind of storm. You can be grateful that you have a home. There's people who don't have a home. They're homeless. You can be grateful for your health. There are people in the hospital who wish they felt as good as you did right now and are fighting for their last breath. So there's a lot that we can just take stock of in this moment and say, looking around us, grateful that you have a mother, even if she drives you a little batty. Hi, Mom. And but there are people out there who lost their mom and wish they could be, with somebody, even if she's driving them batty, just like it'd be nice to be around her and have that energy. So there's a lot that you can consider and look at and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I'm spending too much time complaining about everything that I think is wrong. And that often comes from like an idealistic form of thinking. And it's not realistic, right? And so we want to kind of move ourselves into that energy of thinking, you know what, it could be worse. What is going on that's good in my life? What would somebody else, who doesn't have what I have, what would they say about my life? What would they say about the things that are going on in my world? So that's a good practice for you to start inviting that positive energy. Let's get a gratitude journal. They're like $1 at the dollar store, just a tiny one. Let's get started on that. Another thing that you could do is good deeds, right? And again, this is a podcast about selflessness. You could be looking at things that you could do just to bring somebody else joy, right? Like bring them joy, and it has nothing to do with you. Of course, it does make you feel great. So you're going to be like, well, I'm going to benefit. I think there was a whole Friends episode on that where they said there's no real selfless deed because you always benefit from it. And that was a cute take on it. And there's definitely some truth to that. But, how can we build community? How can we, just do something for somebody else because it brings them joy, right? And the first level is doing it. Sometimes people, they just love to get on social media. Look at what I did. This is so great. Taking a picture. I do charity. And I always say that's level 1 good deeds, because there is good to that and it makes you feel good. But of course, if you get into more of a spiritual realm and you want to live by, spiritual ideas, then you would take away the sharing of those deeds, right? That you would just do them without saying a word about them, that you wouldn't make a video about it. You wouldn't tell anybody because, if you're, leaning towards incorporating more spirituality, at the end of the day, you're not even doing it to feel good about yourself. You're doing it for Creator. You're doing it for God and making sure that God knows that you're using your energy in a good way to bring goodness to this world, to bring joy to others, to bring joy to the world. And it has nothing to do about your ego, right? Because that first level, that's often about ego. And I'm not saying it's totally bad, because I do think that there's still benefit. There's still somebody who is benefiting from your random act of kindness and goodness and that sort of thing. But when you take it up to the next level, you don't need praise for it. You can just do it, and you know that in that moment, you put good in this world. And that is 100% going to bring positivity into your life, because you know that there is good in this world because you brought some there right in this moment, whatever it is you did. And that is so affirming that it's going to be a little bit intoxicating. The more that you do it, the more you're going to feel like, oh, this is incredible. Look at how happy this person was. Now that person believes there's goodness in this world because you did something without thinking about yourself. You just put that person first. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful things you can do in this world. Do something, don't tell anybody about it, just have that moment, right? And know that you brought good and joy into this world. That's going to uplift you so tremendously immediately. And you could plan these things, right? And decide, okay, I'm going to do one today. I'm going to do, whatever. And you start looking for these acts of kindness. Oh, I got to stop here. I remember, and this isn't totally, like selflessness and good deeds, but it kind of is. It's a really cute story. So once upon a time, I used to work at EGADS in Saskatoon. They do a lot of programming. It's a nonprofit to help, people in many different capacities in the community. And one part of this organization, they had young offenders, and And these young offenders needed to do some programming to keep them busy because they couldn't go to school. Some were on probation and that sort of thing. And at that time I worked there, and that was part of my job, was to keep these kids busy and occupied. And I remember they got checks every month, if they attended regularly. It wasn't anything big, like maybe $25 or something. And if they just kind of did all the things they needed to do, showed up every day, they got this free money. And so when I came into the program, the practice that had been going on was that these kids would get into trouble and they'd get deducted. Every time you swore, you would lose 25 cents. Every time, you did something wrong, you get docked. And so then, apparently that was the lesson, that by the time, it was time to hand out the checks, the kids would get $1 or something, and that should teach them. I'm not a fan of any kind of punitive systems. I don't really think that they work. But in any case, I saw these kids who were, maybe a little rough around the edges. And now suddenly they were just irritated. They're not getting any money, and they're not walking away with anything. And they could use the money. I'm sure many of them could have used that money. And so I asked my supervisor at the time, do you mind if I kind of change the system a little? And she said, well, how do you mean? And I said, well, I think that I would like them to earn back money that they've lost. I'm not saying, we need to scrap everything, but just that they have the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. And she said, yeah, sure, give it a shot. I said, okay. And so I remember, often we would have lunch, and at this one place where the kids would have to work in the morning, we would serve them lunch, and it was always a struggle getting the kids to clean up after themselves, stack their chairs, do the dishes and all this kind of thing. So I introduced this to the kids and I said, hey, we're going to try it a little bit differently. And what I would like for you to do is, if you help, because these are real important things that we need to do, like stacking the chairs and whatever, and it ends up being this power struggle, and then, me and the other workers often have to do it if you're not doing it, but I would really like for you to do it. And if you would do it, then you have the opportunity to earn back money that you've lost. And the kids were like, what? Really? And I said, yeah, like if you wipe a table and I see that and I notice that, then, I can forgive you for maybe a mistake you made earlier. And they said, what? And so now the kids would be chasing me all over the place, and they were trying to do good because they wanted perfect, scores. They wanted, everything wiped off of their record so that they would have a full check, and they would follow me around everywhere. Just, can I tuck in a chair for you? Can I grab that for you? Can I do that? And so it was financially motivating for the kids, definitely, but it was so adorable because they were getting into this habit of, what can I do that will make life easier for others and better for others? And at some point, they just got really good at it, and they would get their full checks. But they also started to notice their negative behaviors, the things that got them docked, and they're like, well, it's a lot of work to fix these things, so I'm just gonna stop swearing altogether. I'm gonna stop, doing this and that. And so it was really interesting to see the two sides of their behavior kind of change, that they suddenly, were looking at, okay, I'm not gonna do so much negative, but if I do, I also know that there's positives that I can do to make up for it. And so that's where I'm going with all of this. I love that story. I just always thought it was so adorable when they always ran around me. Jess, look at me, I'm doing this. It was so cute. Anyway, so that is one thing that you could do. Some random acts of kindness, good deeds to bring some positivity into your life and into the world. Another thing would be surrounding yourself with people that you admire, right? And people that are more positive, and maybe they're joyful or cheerful. Like, start to notice these people And if you're, coming from a chronically negative state, these cheerful people might irritate you at first. But if you start to look at them as, hey, you know what, this might be somebody I can learn from. Then if you start spending time with them and do a good deed for them, that will definitely get their attention. And, in making plans, having conversations with them, you'll start to see how they think. And you'll start to learn maybe something that you were not familiar with, how they're approaching life, how they handled setbacks, how they bring joy into their lives and other lives. And you can start taking stock, right? You have a teacher right here. There's lots of people around us who are positive, who are cheerful. And I want you to start noticing these people, start looking for them because they're there. And you know what? They're, probably really kind. They probably would love to share things with you. And especially if you see somebody who is wanting to improve their lives, like there's always a special joy that you get, for like a lot of positive people when they see somebody making an effort to improve their lives. We naturally want to assist those people, right? We want to see more good in the world. We want to see happier, more joyful people. So those people are definitely out there and they want to help you. I really believe that, Another thing would be to start imagining or visualizing positive outcomes, right? And starting to think positively about everything and anyone. And the thing about positivity is that it is naturally imbued with hope, right? It has a hopeful energy, it has lightness, it has joy, which is a stark contrast to negativity, which has, despair and just things that we don't want to associate with because they drag us down and make us feel more tamasic or depressed or, upset. And so when we are starting to visualize the good and the joyful and the positive, then it's really like if you believe in the law of attraction, those sorts of things will start happening, right? Like because those things are attracted to the way you're thinking. Positive energy likes positive energy, and it will, be attracted to you. You'll be inviting this into your world. So it's really key to start imagining positive outcomes. That doesn't mean it's going to be a foolproof plan and everything's going to go exactly as you imagine it, but getting into the practice of it starts to mean that you're inviting faith into your life, right? Because when we think about positivity and, envisioning positivity, we have to have hope and faith in order to believe that these things will happen. And often they will. They'll start happening, and you will start, becoming maybe addicted to thinking of positivity, positive outcomes, and you'll see the power of it, right? There's a real power in positive thinking. Something else that you could do would be to ground yourself. And I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to lock the door and I'm not leaving for the weekend, I'm grounded. Not like that. I mean, in the sense of getting outdoors into nature, right? There's a natural positive energy in the earth, right? And so when you tap into that energy, it's really super healing. And there's like a real science behind it. I know from my dissertation, I have this one article on grounding that's really beautiful, and it speaks to the science aspect of it, which of course I should have brought, my notes for this one, but it definitely talks about, anything that you do outside, especially if your feet are connecting to the earth, without shoes, without socks, like your feet in the grass kind of thing, then you're going to be increasing a natural positive energy into your body. And so, of course, in this article, they really talk about all the things that you could do that incorporates grounding for your health, because it really helps to reverse a lot of the negativity, that happens when we block off this natural energy source, when we, wear shoes and we walk on pavement, and there's barriers now between us and the earth. Then if you strip those things away and you go back into nature, then you're going to start reversing a lot of the damage and whatnot that happens to us when we are detached from nature. And it just goes to show how connected we are to everything around us, right? Like, there's so much energy. In yoga, we'll call this prana. There's a lot of energy that is flowing around us all the time, through us, through plants and animals. And grounding is going to help you tap into that, and you're going to feel better. So some of the things that were recommended in that article were, like doing yoga outside in the grass, sitting and meditating outside, eating your lunch outside on the grass, like having picnics. There's a lot, walking, just getting outside and walking more, taking your pets for walks. And all kinds of activities, right? Outdoor activities are naturally gonna help you with grounding. So anything that you can do that will connect you outside to that energy source, that's going to be naturally uplifting and positive. And there's one more thing, I just want to point it out. So when we were thinking, we thought about negativity, what we're going to do with the negative thoughts and how we're going to try and prevent some of those negative thoughts. We talked about the positivity, how do we keep these positive thoughts? How do we encourage more positivity in our life? But that middle pile, I think I talked a little bit about it, but we definitely want to be reframing. When we're challenging a thought about ourselves that we think is negative, we want to replace it with something kind, right? So we want to make sure that we're saying kind words to ourselves. And, I had a friend who was really great at, correcting me when I said, Jess, you're so dumb, or, that was really stupid. And this person would say, hey, you shouldn't talk about yourself this way. And I found that to be a beautiful practice that, I didn't even recognize that I was doing it. But you know what? I am the guardian and the gatekeeper of my thoughts. And so are you. You're the guardian and gatekeeper of all of the thoughts that are going on in your head. And so you have to take charge of them. You have to filter out, the things that are serving you and the things that are not serving you. The things that are helping to cultivate the right energies in your life, and the things that are creating obstructions. That's on you. You got to do that. And so it's a bit of work. I'm not going to lie. It takes a bit of work. And like I said, it's an overhaul. It's a mind shift. But you can do it. And, listen to this podcast again and again. If you need to remember, take notes, whatever it is you need to do that's going to help you to become more positive, all of these practices are going to help you. So if you get used to this process, then I would say that that's step number one. Right? Me and my goals and my steps. So goal number one is we're taking stock of everything, and we're going to, start this practice. We're going to start, learning how to filter out things and add in things and take charge of all of these thoughts and energies that are kind of circulating around that were happening subconsciously, and no more, because now we're taking charge and we're going to be actively bringing in a positive energy into our life. So that's goal number one. Goal number two, I want us to now look at things objectively. Okay, so this is the next step, where we're not categorizing things as negative or positive. We're just seeing something as it is. And by that token, we are starting to understand that there are positive and negative elements in probably almost everything, right? And if we start to see things clearly, holistically, we understand that it's how you look at the thing, right? And so instead of, tossing out everything or getting rid of things, we start to see that, hey, you know what? For instance, maybe we might start off like I did, with a divorce. And we might be like, oh, it was so awful. I broke up a marriage, the kids suffered. And then you have that deep shame, right? You have this shame inside that, people are judging you, that you're divorced. If you had only stuck through it and just, forced this marriage to happen, then, that was the right thing to do. Or you can start to see that, hey, you know what? Maybe there was a lot of learning lessons that happened as a result of this. And maybe now I see where I needed to grow as a human. And maybe that means my life wasn't perfect, but I can actually see the beautiful things that happened as a result of that divorce. It forced me to sit and really look at my role in that relationship breakdown, my role in that marriage, the things that I said or did, and what led to, the divorce. And it kind of gave me a map or a guidebook to sit there and go, hey, how can I improve these practices in my life? Because obviously it wasn't a fun adventure, but, there were so many beautiful lessons about myself and about how I see people, how I treat people, and how can I use this as a tool to help me going forward. So now I'm not looking at it anymore as just this, horrible, experience and shame, but now I'm starting to go, wait a minute, you know what? There was some use to it, and there was some beautiful things that resulted. For instance, one of the things that I learned about was I was a very conflict avoidant person in my first marriage, and that was something that I really needed to work on. And, later as I did the work and I started to unpack it, I started to see I'm not that way anymore, and I'm a lot more assertive, and I'm able to help people who are conflict avoidant now, and I'm able to, give people tools that maybe they won't have to go through a divorce like I did, because they're able to work through things and, and learn a skill that I didn't have at that time, which I would have loved to have had. But it came later. That skill came to me later. And now I can sit there and see, you know what? That was a gift. That whole, end of that relationship was actually a gift to me. It really helped me in ways that I needed to learn and to grow. And so that's the next step, where we stop just looking at things as, negative or positive, and we start to look at them holistically. That's another goal. So I think you are now ready. You have a lot of practicing, a lot of things to sift through and sort through. And hopefully you'll start to see, of course, you're the gatekeeper of your life. And hopefully you will start to say, okay, maybe I got some work cut out for me. Maybe you were a hoarder of negative thoughts. And now it's time to really, dig in, get some elbow grease in there, rally the troops, get some help. It could be work, but you know what? It's so worth it. And I really invite you to take up that challenge. Because when you start to really cultivate these positive practices in your life, not only are you going to feel better, but so is everybody else around you. And if you really get good at it, people are going to go, gosh, how do you do that? How do you, how are you always so happy and positive no matter when, crap hits the fan? It doesn't rattle you. Well, that's part of it. It's practice, my friend, and I believe in you, and I think you can do it. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Please like, share, subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone. Bye.